Well, I'm Janae Sharp. I'm the founder of the Sharp Index, and I have 4 kids, and I love to hike. And every time people talk about bios, I always want to say something besides work that I do. I also quilt a lot with my grandmother's quilting circle. And I'm sitting down with Chase Anderson. Do you want to introduce yourself? I'm a huge fan of you.
Go.
It's true. Don't say ooh. Did you say
Oh my
ooh?
God, no, I said it. I'm shy.
Okay, well, sorry, I won't be your fan anymore.
See, like that, I love that. It's perfect. I'm Chase Anderson, and I am a child and adolescent psychiatry fellow at UCSF. So I take care of kids who have depression and psychotic features and like anxiety and things like that. And I love to listen to K-pop. I also love reading fantasy books. That's like basically all this side of my bookshelf. And then what else?
Favorite fantasy author?
Ooh, Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, I know him.
Right. Like when he took over for Robert Jordan, I was just astounded with what he did with like the Wheel of Time series. And then he has his own series, which is called the Stormlight Archives. And it's one of the best series I've ever read. Like he brings in mental health with the characters. And like, I just am so in awe. And he did this interview recently or a little while ago about talking about how he doesn't want to bring in LGBT characters without like having them be nuanced and actually like part of the story. And he's already done that with some of the characters. So I was just like, oh, this is somebody who's like a cis white male who's like very thoughtful. So like that rose
That is
like,
nice.
yeah, I was like, ooh, okay.
I met him in college. He like dated one of my roommates. So it's weird to know
Yeah.
someone and people are like, he's famous. I'm like, huh, Brandon? Like, okay.
You're like, I remember stories from back in college.
Yeah, right. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm glad. I want everybody I know from like my past to be like super successful. I'm like, I knew that guy. Not well. He was like, he knew my roommate well. You know, like, no, he's good. I still like Tad Williams better, but it's fine.
I do love Tad Williams. I think just like anybody who like gets published in fantasy and like even people who don't get published, like the fact that you thought of like this whole other universe and like just created something beautiful is awesome. So
I like it too because they can invent spaces for things that we probably need more of, like more experimentation.
yeah, I think fantasy takes us beyond and into what we really want as a society in a lot of ways.
Yes. And I don't know what that says that I'm like super into it and have been my whole life. It's fine.
I mean, we all need our escape. Like that's literally why I read fantasy.
Also, I feel like people who like fantasy often are people who can imagine difference in our real world. They're like, oh, we could change that. It's easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are studies about how reading fantasy, like, and reading other books like that actually creates more empathy in a person because it helps you expand your mind and what, like, see other viewpoints and things like that, which is really cool.
That is cool. Okay, so tell me really about child psychiatry. So I have questions always because I have kids and the nonprofit always talks about stuff with physician burnout, but I feel like you have a lot of perspectives that are kind of even outside of that, like with mental health and youth. I live in Utah. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death, especially it is the leading causes of death for males between 18 and 24. And when I research like availability of mental health care, there's 300 times the need that reported need. So this isn't even people who don't go in to get care. These are people who are actively seeking care, who are unable to get it. And I don't know if everybody knows a lot about mental health care, giving it. So I wanted to ask you about that and how you came to that field.
Yeah. So how I got into it was when I went to college at MIT, and I really like those friends were life changing. They saved my life. I've actually like written about them recently. And we would sit and talk with each other until dawn, and like get to know each other and like our full stories. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like when people actually sit down with you and care about you. Because I had entered college with pretty bad depression. Like people didn't know. I didn't really talk about it. Only my sister knew. But like suicidal, like constantly. But you couldn't tell. I was like very outgoing, very like I knew how to maneuver in the system.
Right.
And a
Well,
lot of
that's
that,
important. If you know how to, if
yeah,
you know your way around the system, you can
yes, you can get
project
the
what you need to.
yep, the mask that we wear to survive. And at MIT, like I had friends who were like, oh, I'm also like suicidal. I'm also like depressed. I'm also sad. And like these are the reasons why. And mine like come from racism and homophobia and things like that. That's what sets it off for me. But over the course of being at MIT, it was very much people just let me be myself and supported that. And I got to support other people. And so my depression without meds or therapy like vanished when I entered grad school at MIT.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, I talked about it with like whenever I tell people, they're like, that doesn't happen usually. And like depression does fade away usually, but mine was because of the environment. And so just a safe and secure environment as a minoritized person, like changed my life. Um, so then I entered med school and became class president. The depression came back because of racism and homophobia and like other things in the medical system from classmates and from deans and other people. Made a lot of changes there, had allies, but I had to like constantly work to build those alliances. And then in my third year, that's when we started our clinical rotations. And my first rotation was psychiatry. And I was like, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Like, this is too real. It's too close.
Right.
And then I had a resident, so somebody who was higher up. So medical student, then resident, then fellow, then attending is how it works. And he created space for a patient to open up about having like HIV, and his wife knew about that, but didn't know that he was gay.
Oh,
And
wow.
like he started crying during our meeting. And I was like, oh, this is what I did in college with friends, where we would just sit and talk. And then we also got to use meds to help this person get better. So it was like the combination of storytelling and like the art of like medicine that like came to fruition for me. I was like, okay, so you're depressed right now, but like, what if you now have a unique insight into how to help people because of
Right.
that? What if you will be that person who is already gifted at this and can sit there with them in that like dark space that they're in and maybe bring a little bit of light for them and just hold their hand. So then I always knew I was going to do pediatrics, but I had planned to do pediatric oncology. I shadowed for one day and they didn't talk to the patients that much. And I was like, oh, so like I need to be in a field that works like directly with the kids. So then went to MGH for my residency in adult psychiatry and then came here to UCSF because UCSF, when I interviewed, answered all my questions about race and racism the best.
Oh, they
And
did. That's good. Right.
yeah, yeah, I knew how to ask those questions too by that point. Um, so in the day-to-day life, I get to take care of kids who have like depression for the first time sometimes. They're becoming more anxious because of the societal pressures that they experience or school, or like they've had to grow up really quickly because of like just what they're seeing on the news and what they hear from other people. I see people who have their first psychotic break. And so we have to help figure out how do we help their family take care of them, as well as how do we help them and get them back on track with meds, but also therapy. And then also like people who have bipolar disorder for the first time. So like elevated mood and then crashing into depression and things like that. So it's a gift getting to do that. But you are completely right. There are not enough mental health providers for like the mental health needs that we have in society. And I think we still aren't talking openly enough about mental health. It's one of the reasons I talk about my own as well.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'm interested in that. Like when you say we aren't talking openly about it, I agree. Um, I've shared some of like the story of John dying, but what I always tell people is like when you're open, you get to control the conversation, which is which is nice in some ways.
Yeah,
Like
very
the
much so.
person who's talking sometimes is the one controlling the narrative. And I wonder about that with mental health. Like, what do you think is missing, or And I also was curious when you said you knew what questions to ask, because that's something that I think is a tool everyone needs. Like, which questions are the ones we need to ask?
Yes. So I'll take the questions one first, and then
Yeah,
we'll.
that one's a good one. It's a good one. I
Okay.
mean, I thought of it,
I mean,
but
I love
actually,
it. I'm here
you
for
said
it.
it first.
We're working together well. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Just, but we got over the initial disappointment at me being a fan of you.
we've moved on from the ew, and we're now like actually.
No.
Yeah. Ew. Um, so I when I went to med school, I didn't know the right questions to ask. I was just like, oh, you take whatever med school you can get. Like, hopefully I get like a really good one, which I did. And I will always value the education and the alliances I built there. Um, and then when I went to residency, I was like, you need to ask better questions. Like, you need to figure out, what is this place like? What are these people like? Will I leave this university a better person, or will I leave like having to put myself together after being shattered? um, because I didn't realize in going into med school, I felt like a whole person when I entered. And I lost some of the best parts of myself along the way. I kept most of them just because of my outside friends and the alliances. But I don't talk to most people from my class anymore, which is really sad because I helped care for them for 4 years.
Right.
So I wanted to ask the
That's
right questions to find the right
always
environment.
part of med school, or do you think that's like,
I think if you're minor, I think in some ways there's a rat race in med school.
oh, yeah.
Um, and it's always like, how do I not compete, but also like, I need to get the best thing. I need to like do the best on this next exam. I need to get the best residency. I need to get the best fellowship. I need to like, when can you just like be a real person? And I had people who, I think just me showing up as a Black gay president who seemed confident and like knew what I was doing at the beginning before I like started crumbling. It makes, I've seen where I just show up in a room and it makes people feel triggered and threatened, even though I'm just here to be your friend.
Right.
Like, I just want to take care of people and I just want to be like a friendly person. It sets off their implicit biases in ways that they don't know how to react to. And some people are more intentional about it, but there are some people I've met, especially some of my classmates, who like would say things I was just like, did you process this before it came out of your mouth?
You're like, did you realize you just said,
Yep, something hugely racist. And some people didn't. Some people did. Those are the dangerous people too. So when I went to residency, I asked program leaders when I was interviewing, and it puts me in a precarious position because like bringing up race and racism like during interviews can feel scary.
right?
And people can reject you out of hand just because you brought it up. And I asked, have there been any problems with race or racism or homophobia here? And I remember the program that I ended up at, the program leader at the time was like, oh, I haven't heard of anything, but if there was, then we would stand up for you. Some of those people that said that were the first people to come after me and have like secret meetings about my not wearing a tie and how that was unprofessional, how calling me the wrong name. They would call me the name of the only other Black resident that we had. Like, yeah, it was a mess. Again, made alliances, but then I was like, I'm leaving. Like, I'm gonna once again leave my best friends from college because I can't stay here, which was also sad, because I had worked for 4 years to come back to them. And then I interviewed for fellowship and I was like, you need to take control of this narrative. Like, you need to ask the right questions. And so I changed my question pattern and I would say instead, what are specific instances of racism and homophobia that have happened at your university and how are they dealt with by the program? And what did you do to change the program? That's such a different question because it takes it out of their hands
Right.
and makes it so they have to answer, basically.
Yeah. And you're asking for something specific. So it's very, also the idea that it's never happened is,
Right? I think I was in the fantasy at the time because I wanted to leave med school and I wanted to go back home to Boston. And so when somebody said that, I immediately was like, oh, like I can live a like happy life again. One of the other universities I interviewed at in Boston, one of the program leaders was like, it's going to be hard. It's post 2016 right now. You are a Black gay male in America. That is going to be horrible. You've already probably had to do a lot of teaching. You might have to do more, but I will support you. I actually rank that place lower because it was too honest at the time. I wanted still like the fantasy. And I was like,
you're like, it's too soon. It's too soon.
it was, yeah, it was too soon. I was like, I can find a place that like this doesn't happen at. And then I was like, oh man, I like chose the wrong place. But again, like made changes with people. But when I asked that question at UCSF, the program director was like, we have not always been the best at handling these situations. Here is what we have done to make things better. Here is what we will do to keep you safe. And then she also was like, what do you want to, she asked one of the most beautiful questions I've seen in an interview. She was like, who do you want to be as a person when you leave this program? Who do you want to be as a physician? What can we do to help you find yourself? And I answered, I just want to take racism and homophobia a little bit off the table so then I can really get back to the work that I need to help other people. Because I think we don't realize in in society that Black people and minoritized people taking on all these things all the time, it's they have to do it to survive the day for themselves,
Right.
while also being perfect physicians, while also being like the person who smiles all the time, and then being the person who also looks out for everybody else. If you can take a little bit off the table of like the racism or discrimination that person faces, it lets them use more of that to help other people take it off the table for them too. Like all the writing that I've done that like we've talked about and stuff, that only really started at UCSF because I've been freed up to do that.
Freed up, like mentally, you don't have to deal with managing other people's emotions, or do you think just managing so much of the outside world?
I think both. I would have to, and also excellent question. I would wake up in the morning during residency in med school with my hands and feet were cold because I was having panic attacks and I was suicidal. And I had to stand in the shower and say, like, you have to get to work. Like, you have to go take care of your classmates. You have to go do this because maybe you can make this place better. But I would map out in my
That's
head.
hard.
Like,
I feel like that's
yeah,
very
it's hard.
relatable, like wanting to make things better in a bad place, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think people who are really empathic, it's like we feel this onus to like take care of everybody else and make a place better when sometimes it's not our job because that place has so much going on. But I would stand in the shower and map out who I was going to interact with that day, who they knew, how something I said could like resonate across different people, who like was the biggest gossiper and like it would spread around, how to circumnavigate them, how to deal with like leadership, how to also then think about like the world. And like I wasn't reaching the people I needed to. I was taking care of people who were pretty selfish. And I was like, I'm not helping kids. I'm not helping like the LGBT people I need to help, the like underrepresented minority people. So you kind of get stuck. And so I had to like every day was thinking about that just before I even got out of the shower.
I feel like that's also very relatable, like taking on other people's things. I don't identify as like an empath at all. I'm like, sorry, even if like I love you, I probably need you to cue me on your feelings. Like I might not even see him even if you tell me. But there is that sense of like wanting to make things better or feeling like I have a friend who was telling me this story and I'm just like, yeah, but like that other person is doing nothing. And it's easier to see from the outside. Like
Yeah.
it's always easier to see from the outside. You're like, they do nothing and you're doing everything.
Yes.
But people who are hardworking or like people who have that drive to do well, they end up sometimes wasting their energy on people who just take. And
Yes.
I think that's a hard boundary for physicians, but also for everyone. Like,
It's for everyone. Yeah. Like I think we it's hard to see people are taking because we're trying to not take. So we expect that one day all of those people will be like those givers. And hopefully, I think in the right circumstances, everybody would change to be that way. But it's not on you to always
I
sit there.
wonder. I don't think so. I think some people
You don't
just
think?
don't. This is like a hard life lesson
It's
for
a
me
hard
as an
question.
adult.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. Someone's like, I think that guy's just a bad person. And I was like, what? He's
But
like,
I think,
maybe stop trying to justify things. And I'm like,
but it's
oh,
hard not to. It's
it's
hard not to
hard. Like, I'm
justify
like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And also that's like why I'm being a child psychiatrist, because I think like a lot of these people, imagine if you had captured somebody who like is a bad person earlier and
Yeah,
given them like the right role models, the right groups. Like there are people, so people with different personality disorders sometimes actually like there are studies, and giving them a safe environment where they feel secure and things like that, that helps. Like that can actually change the course of their life. So like I think there are people who have bad behaviors,
right,
but in the right circumstance, they might not have ever gone down that route.
right. You need a healthy model
Yes.
and a healthy support system.
Yep.
Wait, what was my other question? The one you wanted
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
second?
No, no. What are we not talking enough about?
Yeah.
That
Okay,
I love.
because I have thoughts about that. Because, I talk about mental health a lot, and sometimes I sit there and question. I'm like, are we actually having the right conversation? Like in the case of suicide, especially physician suicide,
Yes.
um, it's interesting, both because people are like, well, physicians aren't exactly the most sympathetic group, first of all. And second of all, because it's like, oh, a lot of the narrative, we want it to be clean. Like,
Yes.
if it's not clean enough, we don't like it.
Yeah.
Or, if like we don't want to talk about the really difficult things.
Yes.
And there's a balance. Like you don't want to be the person just complaining all day, but I wonder if we're doing a disservice to the complexity that exists.
Yeah. I think we do. I think it's almost like I envision it kind of like our society. We've lost the nuance and the thread. We're very like it's this or it's this. We kind of it's this thing called splitting, where it's like black or white thinking, and you think something's good or bad. Like, but thinking about suicidality is so complicated. Like
Right.
for me, it comes from like I'm in remission. Like I haven't had a suicidal thought in like months. Or well, a month. Like I had one like flare on my birthday because of like past thoughts about birthdays, but like I'd been in remission for a year and I'm still in remission technically.
Right.
But mine comes from those factors. Like other people's come from like socioeconomic standing. Some come from like living in like horrible areas. Some come from like people being abused. That's messy. Like that
Right.
is so messy.
So messy.
And
I
so
think about
like yeah, you can't have somebody go through those things and expect their narrative to be clean when they've never been taught about how to even like figure out their actual narrative.
right. Also, sometimes the narrative is a luxury. I think about that. I've done things with, you know, economically disadvantaged groups and like single parents. And I always say, like, people who've been really poor have a different understanding of how to show up for you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, if you ever really need something, ask someone who's poor or ask someone who's been poor because they will show up because they get it. They get it. If you're like, oh, well, you might actually just need dinner now. Like, and people who understand that they have a different way of showing up. And there's a gap though. I certainly never really understood that racism existed growing up, even, you know, I kind of understood it theoretically, but not really. And I think it's the same thing. Like we don't we don't give the full narrative, but I wonder how you can, or if it's, I think it's that same question. Like, is this going to be like a continuum, or is it something where we can actually accept a nuance? Because people aren't good at that. We're very bad at that.
I'm
Like,
so bad at that.
we're so bad at it. Like people are like, okay, but like, are we done with this death thing now? After John died, it's like I don't think they meant to,
Yeah.
because I just think we are so bad at handling it and being able to carry that, but also on a fundamental level, we're bad at being like, you know what, I'm not perfect and that's okay. Like
Yeah.
we hate ourselves if we're not perfect. So we
Yes.
either blame someone else or like pretend it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
When I say we, I might mean me, and I might mean like someone I'm talking about specifically who's listening to this, you know it's you. I always tell people like, if you think it's you, it is. It is
It is
about you.
you. Yeah. If you don't think it's you, you might want to delve a little bit more because
Yeah.
it's also probably you.
If you feel triggered by what I say and you're my personal friend, I'm definitely talking about you.
I think you're spot on. I think it's so hard for people to sit with the uncomfortable feelings. We run away from them. And that's why like I think you've seen how I wield Twitter in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Like I I am fortunate that I am in a place and with an educational background and like other privileges to leverage that privilege to weave a narrative that makes sense to people.
Right.
Because you're right. Some people, like, if I just had gone on Twitter and been like, oh, I've been suicidal, people would be like, what? Like, it wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Right.
Like, I had to think about it. And I was like, how do I tell this narrative in a way that, like, people not only care about it, but also, like, aren't turned off by it, but also
Right.
it teaches people. And like if somebody is actively suicidal or like having issues or like has a lot of other things to deal with, we shouldn't be expecting them to like wield a narrative that's perfect because their life is not perfect. And we
Right.
need to be okay with that as a society. Like we're not perfect people. Nobody is.
I mean, I look really good. I mean, obviously my hair, because it is perfect.
Yeah, no, your hair is perfect. Like we all have our perfect pieces.
Yeah. Um, I think that's really interesting, like being very conscious about how you approached your image and how you shared that story. That's hard.
Yep.
Like I have not always been perfect at that. One of the things that I've seen a lot is we talk a lot about this importance of stories. And I feel like in mental health, this is one of my huge pet peeves in mental health too. So if you want to see me like get semi ranty and yell a little, we can talk about it. When people are like, get help, share your story, it's like, oh God, I'm sorry, were you not depressed? Like, do you need, hey, I know what will help you with being overwhelmed. How about I give you a checklist of more shit to do?
Do
Um,
exercise and eat broccoli.
yeah, like, oh, you're sad. Have you considered sleeping more? Like, like they tell you that when you're like a new parent and you're like, yeah, I have considered sleeping more, but I don't actually think you're gonna help me. Um, um, it's exhausting. Like that's an exhausting expectation. And
Yep.
like you went into that. So I want to hear more about kind of like what that's really like. People have this idea, oh my gosh, you get so much you get like attention, that's great. Um, but I wonder if it really is great for you. Like because
Excellent question.
I've shared some of my story and it's great sometimes, but it's
Yes.
also not great and also not what I expected.
Yeah. Completely agree. I think that was
Like, is
the
it great? Are you okay? I'm like, I'm not
right.
an empath,
Like,
but I'm gonna ask you a question like that.
yes. Yep. I think like so I was like under an anonymous Twitter account, like or a pseudonym at the beginning. And that was because I needed to kind of like first of all, I was scared of my previous university like finding me and like getting mad at me because they'd already gotten mad at me for things about like racism that I brought up. But I think what I also was scared of was like, it's a move to be out there. Like, I don't think people appreciate sometimes is like a Black gay physician or like a female or a woman talking about like these hard topics. It leaves you exposed. Like,
Right.
you are vulnerable to like multiple attacks. And like, sure, you can block people, but it doesn't mean that you don't take on the words that they said to you. Um, so I actually crafted very carefully with Jack Turbin, who's one of my colleagues from MGH. He's now at Stanford. He's wonderful.
He's great. I haven't met him in
Yeah,
person,
he's
but
perfect.
I think I'm Pokemon friends with him.
Oh, you probably are. He loves Pokemon. It's like his thing. It's very cute. We
I
like
was
went
like,
into
oh wait, hang on, you do Pokemon?
yeah, yeah.
Cancel all this. Give me your code.
He's wonderful. I think I also like I kind of like planned this out a little bit. I was like, so don't start talking about your mental health at first. Kind of ease down, like bring people down into it with you. That's kind
Yeah.
of what I do with people is I'm like, I take you down levels very carefully. The other thing I
Because
did was
you're an
okay,
expert. Like this is what you do.
I
This is your
am not an
job.
expert. I
I'm
try to
like,
do my
how did
best.
you learn that? I'm like, wait.
Training, training and life situations.
Yeah.
Um, and then with writing, I actually I opened my pieces with not talking about my mental health. I talked about racism and I was like, here are facts. Like here's like personal narrative a little bit. So you know that I understand it. Here's facts to like back that up. And then here's a closeout of like, it could be much better.
Right.
I waited until I think it was like my seventh article or so that when I was like, okay, now I can talk about my suicidality. It'll be just like a little piece, but enough to like, I had already talked about it on Twitter by that point, but I was like, now it's time to like put that out there. That article went well, but I then did an article where I was talking about police violence and what that does is by proxy trauma for minoritized people. And it was on Stat News, and I have to commend them for how they handled this. But I remember I was so pleased about the article. I was so excited, and people loved it. And then I went and looked at the comments on Stat News.
Big
I know,
mistake. Big
I know.
mistake.
Like I didn't know that at the time. I was like, ooh, but they usually have somebody who like monitors for comments and removes them if they're inappropriate.
Oh
That
wow.
person was gone that day.
Of course.
I was like,
You're
God
like,
damn it.
there's something about racism publishing because that's my
Yeah.
vacation day.
Yep. I was like, oh damn it. So I saw comments where they were like, somebody wrote like wah wah wah. Somebody also wrote like maybe you need help, like psychiatric help. And I was like, honey, I get my help and I know what to do. You clearly don't.
You're like, did you think me saying I needed help was
It's like I don't think they knew where that was going. And just like this vitriol that like I don't look at that article anymore. They removed all the comments and they like were like so apologetic about it. But I don't that's what can happen to Black people and minoritized people when they speak about their stories is like people can be cruel. And like it was scary because I was like, there's somebody sitting there saying, like, somebody threatened me later on with some stuff. And I was like, somebody's sitting there and like, this is what they're doing with their lives. And like, what protection do I have? Because clearly, like, some of these websites don't take these people to task.
right.
So I think that's something we don't talk about enough in mental health and people being advocates is how exposed it leaves us.
Right. What do you mean by websites taking you to task? That's interesting.
Like
Like,
if
don't have people go on vacation.
while an article about racism goes out.
Yeah.
But thinking about like Facebook and what comments people write or like Twitter and like I reported people for calling me the N-word on Twitter and they were like, this is not against our standards. And I was like, what? Like it's hate speech. The other thing that like has
They're like,
happened,
look, if we have to take that down, it's over.
I was like, if you have to take those accounts down, like look at how long that took them to take down Trump. And he was so vitriolic. And that didn't go against community standards. Like it's how we are not only like not protecting people who do speak up, but we are not taking to task the people who are doing really bad things to other people.
I think sometimes because people are jealous. Like, maybe I shouldn't say, like,
No, I think that does play in. I
they're
definitely
like,
agree.
well, he can say that. And you're like, huh.
Yeah. And I think there's jealousy that comes from they are seeing like our sphere on Twitter, like our gay med Twitter sphere, like all of them have gone through things. But one of the things I've actually thought about and heard from a mentor one time was like people sometimes come after people because they're jealous that they seem to live their lives so openly.
Yes.
And that is hard for them because they never got to do that.
No, but showing up as yourself is incredibly hard, I think. As someone who's like spent a lot of energy in my life trying not to be seen, or to be able to control how people see you. When you show up as yourself, you let go of the control. And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because the only thing you can guarantee is that it doesn't go how you want it to
go. Right? Like you let go of control, but you also get control back. It's like weird.
Yeah.
It's weird, like you're out blowing in the like stratosphere, but you're also like, well, now they like can't come after me because of like saying I'm suicidal because like I've already like owned that narrative. Like I already talked about it. Like I already talked about how the N-word feels. If they call me that, then it's just like them being stupid and like
right.
You know that already. So like
that's interesting. Yeah.
It helps you. You're right. It's very much like a blowing in the wind, but also control. Like you feel like you get yourself back because you're just like, huh, All right. What are you gonna do?
I feel like it's also a big commitment.
Yeah.
Like you've committed to this person. Like, do
Yeah.
you feel like people hold you to that? I feel like this happens. The reason I'm asking is like, the nonprofit talks a lot about physician mental health. And when you share your story, it becomes your story. And some people don't want you to deviate from it. Um,
Yeah.
it's like, sorry, on Thursday, like, I'm fine. Like,
Yeah.
or like, like, I care except on the days that I'm tired. And I think about that. Like, the danger in sharing your story is that for a lot of people, once it's written in stone. And you're a mental health professional. How do you help people and like the overall societal narrative? How do you help it become both more open and more shared, but less rigid?
Yeah.
I'm asking you hard questions. These are
No,
like
no,
my,
no. I
I'm
love
like,
this.
look, I have real questions
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Like I was like, wow, waking up early. We are going. Like I
I'm
love
like,
this.
so let's talk about like rigid societal norms.
But it's important. We're having these are the important discussions we need to be having. I think so. What you've seen on Twitter and things like that is I break my narrative a little bit. Like I could just talk about mental health, but you've seen me. Like I
Yeah.
post gifs, I do things about K-pop, I help with like gay med Twitter. Like I show that we can be so multifaceted. So if somebody tries to pigeonhole me, then I just like move around them and I like redirect them. I'm like, I'm gonna go do my own thing.
That's
I
exhausting. I mean,
it's
maybe it's not exhausting. I mean, like honestly, the
it can
K-pop
be.
Twitter is not exhausting, but K-pop Twitter is like amazing.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
But
But it
like
can be exhausting.
for you, that's probably exhausting. Like,
Yeah, because they want black physicians to always talk about like black things and like black stuff. And like when you don't, or like you don't
I'm
talk
gonna
about
like
gay
pull that
things.
out as like a little clip. They want black physicians talking about black things. Like, this is
Literally what they want. And I'm just like, I'm not sitting here as with you as a white person being like, oh, just tell me about white things. Like, I don't think that way.
if you want to have like an extensive conversation about sunscreen and or like clothing that will cover you, but like allow you to be outside, I'm your girl.
Yeah, I'm here for that. Because it's also like, that's just one piece of you. We need
Yeah.
to see people as multifaceted. So I think you've also seen like, so
White things,
I,
like, yeah.
no, we're gonna do white things later.
We can talk about Starbucks.
Oh my god, okay, I love Starbucks. So like I'm also it's the gay in me. Like if I didn't like Starbucks, I don't know if they'd cut up my gay card. Like it wouldn't they'd come for me.
Yeah.
Um
I taught one year, I taught
yeah.
German, and my students were like, one of my favorite things about you is your white girlness. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a little offensive, first of all. And second of all, I do love Lululemon.
Yeah,
And
you
I
were like,
know
yeah, no,
I
I
know
did.
that it is deeply problematic. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean like we are gonna like what we like as long as like we are much more than just one piece. And so I think with breaking the narrative or not always sticking to like that exact narrative. I remember one of the other reasons I was afraid to like reveal myself on Twitter was like, now your name is to this. Like, it's not just your pseudonym. People will know you. Like, I've had people see me on the street and stop me and be like, hi, like, it's so great to meet you. And I'm like, I like am walking
You're
around with
like,
my
I know, right?
no, I'm like, how do I escape? Like, these people are super sweet, love it. But
No,
I'm
you're like,
really
ew,
yeah,
ew,
I should just start doing that and just be like, ew.
ew. Be like Jerry Seinfeld. People are like, can I meet you? Be like, no, I
Ew,
don't know
no,
you.
no soup for you.
You have to
Like,
think of a present. Be like, maybe you could give me this then.
no, but I miss sometimes the anonymity. I don't talk about it much. But I know it's helping. But I think it was something I had to think about long and hard of like, then people will hold you to different standards. Like, look at what just happened in the Olympics of holding like people, black women to standards that are not right. Um, and
Right.
so people like sometimes will expect me, they'll be like, Chase, I DM'd you. Can you help me with this thing? And I'm like, you're revealing information to me that you should be telling a therapist or a psychiatrist. And like, so,
And no
but
one, I've never, as someone who has never done that, I would never overshare.
but I love you looking down in a way as you said that. But I get that those people are sometimes in distress. And so I get it. But also we need to learn how to respect people's space, because like I've had people come up to me like at parties and stuff and like say like hello, but then hang out and stuff. And like it's super nice, it's super sweet, but like sometimes I need my time. And so I open up a lot more about myself than I think sometimes people do, because I also want you to see me as human, and I want to take myself off that pedestal that like if anybody's put me on that, because we're not here to do that to each other. We're here to like be shoulder to shoulder with each other.
What do you like to talk about that no one ever asks you?
People don't ask me enough about my dreams and hopes. Like I think people can sometimes see me and other minoritized physicians as people who are like taking this on. We're like taking on the challenge. We're like reshaping things. I'm like, but you never asked if I wanted to do this. Like I do it because I know I can and I know I can help. But you have no idea that I would love to just sit in a cabin in the woods with like a little like prairie area and like a
You're an
little
introvert, yeah. Because right
I'm an
now I'm
introvert.
feeling,
Yeah. I'm super introverted, and I am taking these things on because I know it's my duty to, and I'm here to help, and I can. But I would love to just sit and write fantasy books and like get published in fantasy, or like I wrote a memoir and I would love to get that published and like things like that. I just wanted to write. That's all I wanted to do when I was younger. I didn't think like I would have to be like a gay Black physician talking about racism. Like that's part of my calling card, but like I just wanted to inspire dreams for people.
right.
Um, so that's what people don't ask me enough
What
about.
type of dreams? Like, I'm interested in that. Like, when you say people don't ask you about your dreams,
Yeah.
I love that, first of all. Second of all, not an introvert, but you guys took power last year. I was like,
We had our moment. We were like, yeah.
all my introvert friends are like, la la la. It's like, they're like, we knew we were more powerful than all of you.
We ascended to our thrones very easily. We were like, we've
Right.
just been waiting.
And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Can you not be alone? Must be.
We were
I'm
like,
like,
this is our time.
yeah. All my introvert friends were like living their best lives, as well as my conspiracy theorist friends. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
like,
that was yeah.
it
That
was like
was
the height. Yeah. So what dreams do you have? Like active dreams? Like, do you still just want to be like a writer, or
I would love to be a writer. That's all
you
I've
can do
ever
that?
wanted. Huh?
You can do
I
that. It's
I can
easy.
do that. It's no, because getting published. I now sit with 500 rejections for fantasy books I wrote and the memoir I wrote, where
Oh,
people
really?
were like, yeah, where people were like,
Do you know, I know
oh,
this is, I'll probably
go
take
ahead.
this up too. Like, I know a lot of fantasy publishers. I edit. I'm like a reader
Yeah.
for some of them. Anyway, I'm
No,
also I'm also mean about editing
no,
books.
you have to be. But
Yeah.
I
I'm
think,
like, so this story is interesting. I wondered if like how far you would take this person, like if they would actually be interesting.
yeah,
I was
I
like,
think, I think it's like I have gotten rejections where somebody wrote like, I think if you were more talented at writing and understood the uniqueness of your story for the memoir I wrote about like suicidality in med school, then maybe it would be a better book. And I was like, there's
like,
so many things
hey, if
wrong.
you were better at this, it'd be better.
Yeah,
You're like, thanks
no
for the
actual
feedback.
feedback. Yep. People would say like, oh, this is interesting, but not for me. Like there's a huge problem with racism in the publishing world,
Uh-huh.
and for minoritized writers. And I think the other things that I got was like sometime like back when I wrote fantasy, somebody was like, oh, how you're writing, how you do it is lazy. And you don't say somebody who's Black, like don't ever do that. And the thing
Oh, that's
is,
a little lazy.
yeah, I was like,
Oh, are you a minority physician?
yeah, I was like, oh, I
Lazy.
think I'm doing enough. And I think my writing is fine. And I think it took me years to figure out that my writing was okay. Jack actually is the person who helped me publish my first article, because he's like, you were not bad at writing. And like, now I'm in some of the top journals, but I still can't get published. And what I actually did was the memoir, like all the pieces you all have read are actually, I broke the
Portions.
memoir. Yeah, I broke the memoir into like little pieces. And so like those have all been good and successful. So
That's interesting. So maybe this
go ahead.
that the publishing world problem is actually part of like the problem of like society sharing the wrong narrative, right? So do they
Yes.
start like their own, do you start your own publishing thing as part of the dream, or is it like social media gives us a lot of opportunities that wouldn't be there otherwise? But I've heard that from other writers, you know,
Yeah.
or
I
who should, I mean, you just have Brandon Sanderson help you, like, you know.
right, just like tweet at him and be like, hi.
I have like 100% confidence that stuff like that works. I'm like, it could work. It will work. People
I
like,
mean, there are
you
definitely
live in
people
a
who do
fantasy
that.
world, and I'm like, I do, but it's real.
I think that's like there are definitely people who get through that way. I started writing op-eds
Uh-huh.
and like that, and those have all done really well. Like I sometimes want to go back to those agents who did this and be like, and said those words that were really hurtful and be like, is this what you do to people on a regular basis? Because I also just published in Newsweek and the New England Journal of Medicine. Like I think those people also value my writing.
Hmm. It's like the
So
power differential. You have to like take,
yeah,
like skip the middleman.
yeah. And I moved around them to like get the story out there. But I think in terms of you brought up like my dreams that we don't talk about otherwise, I see the world differently. Like I envision this world like made of like crystal glass and diamonds, and like people are just kind and they like wear makeup in the streets and they like dress however they want, and like people just get along and we like sit on the river and just talk and have deep conversations and we go out to party and like it's just, and there are no more wars, and like we've dismantled our nuclear warheads. Like I just think we could be so much better with such little effort. That's what I that's my dream, is like having a peaceful world for people.
How do people put that into impact? Like, how do you do that on a real personal level? Like, we're obviously putting energy other places. Otherwise, it wouldn't,
Yeah.
you know.
I think it's a lot of self-reflection, which is hard for people. I
Okay.
think like I constantly am thinking about how do I interact with people? How do I help people feel better about themselves? I don't know if we think about that kind of stuff enough. I also don't think we listen enough.
Yeah.
Like we don't just sit down. Like you
Not
and I
while
have
I call my dad so he can be here for that.
yeah,
Just
no,
kidding.
no. But
Bless
like,
his heart.
yeah, no, but
I
like
only say that because I know he'll listen and be like,
he will
oh,
listen to this.
like,
You know he's
well,
listening to all your interviews. Like
I know she talked about me on the interview.
he like can sense it right now. Like
Yeah.
he's like
He's
my
probably
new
about to text me. Probably some advice about real
right?
estate. No, we
Um,
are bad at listening. Like,
so bad at it.
I'm not always good at listening.
It's a process. Like we I don't think we're taught to listen in a lot of ways.
Uh-uh.
Like nobody teaches a class on like this is how you listen to your friends and how you actually listen to them and sit with them.
Oh, especially with sitting with grief or like with mental health. Like I've never seen people get so uncomfortable so fast. And even me personally, like I'm better at doing than sitting. So it's like even if I need to come help someone, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna fold the laundry while I listen. Cause like I cannot like if just sitting there, it's like torture.
Yeah. We're taught that listening and sitting with grief and like suicidality and other things is like scary and we shouldn't do it. I think we need to stop at like, yes, it is scary and I can do it. Like
Yeah.
we can sit with somebody who's there because just sitting with them will help.
So tell me more about your successful writing. I want to hear about the yeah. So someone
Well,
told you no, and then that didn't work.
I was told no, like it was, so I'd written fantasy since sixth grade, started trying to publish when I was around 20, got rejections. Like sometimes I would get through to the like people would want to read the whole thing, but then there was always like, oh, it's not for me, but like you're so talented. Or it would be like, you're not talented and like you need to do better. It was just like, I can't win. Like I could not win. And I like was so defeated. I never wanted to write again. And I wrote like a little tiny thing in residency that was just about like one of my experiences, because I was like, I need to maybe do something. But then I was like, you can't get published. Like it just doesn't work. And Jack actually, like, I love Jack a lot for this, and just like him as a person, he was like, this is good. People need this. This is your avenue. Because I felt so stuck in residency trying to fix the university that I was like, I couldn't figure out how to help people who needed it. And he actually bothered me for 3 months about it. I was like, no, I don't want to submit it anywhere. No, I don't want to do this. No. And then he was just like, just do it. And so like he
It's like,
edited my,
you're going to need to do it now.
yeah, he like, that's literally what he did. And he was just like, you're going to do it. And like, we're going to submit it to this place. And I was like, oh, fine, I hate you. And I have to say, Jack Turpin has never led me astray. Any advice he has given to me, like even if I do it years later, it's always great and it like works out really well. So I just like need to listen to him from the first get-go. But then we published it. It was
Don't tell him that. There'll be no living with him.
Yeah. No. Like we have to edit that out. Like
we will definitely edit that out. Like
no talking about Jack Turpin.
We don't want to be like, he's so good. Don't let this go to your head. And next time I'm not listening to you, don't bring this up.
You know, he'll like record it as a clip and share it and be like, Chase, do you remember this?
Yeah. Like, and then right afterwards, he'll say, I have to talk about Black physician things.
Yep. That's exactly what's going to happen. So
I mean, you know, you have pink hair and he doesn't.
He does. Yeah, he does not.
He's probably still back at my level where you're like, are you sure you want the pixie cut?
Whereas I'm like, we're going to go whole hog. We're just going to do it.
Yeah. Go big or go home.
Right. So by the time he and I like were working on that piece, I was at 470 rejections. Like the memoir had gotten 75. The other 4 fantasy books I had written had gotten like 100 each, and then I would give up on them. And I remember getting like I got pretty far with some literary agents, but then it was always something wrong with it. I was like, can you just let me tell my story? Because I know it works. I would not be alive and I would not be here if my story and how I told it did not work. I would not have the following I have on Twitter or been able to make the changes I did if I didn't know what I was doing. So stop like thinking about this rigid way of like writing and how things are supposed to be, and let me do my thing, because you're stifling voices before they even are heard. And then Jack was like, let's do this. And so I published the first piece under a pseudonym. And it was talking about my experiences in bigotry. And like, it trended on Twitter, and like it trended on like med Twitter, and people were sharing it in like different gay physician groups. Like, and I saw all of this because I was like behind a firewall basically, because nobody knew who it was.
Right.
And I was like, oh, so you're not bad at writing. And then I just like started writing more after that, because I was like, this is my way of reaching people because I'm getting shut out of the other way.
So I wonder if you'll just invent new forms of publishing. No big deal.
I think minoritized writers might need to, because like if you look at the top 5 publishing houses, they're sadly still like, I think it's 85 or more % white.
Which is great. A little boring, but great. Bless their hearts.
Yeah. We keep churning out the same stories.
It's boring. Yeah.
It's boring. It's boring.
Not that I haven't read a lot of,
I mean, I've read a lot of that.
I mean, not that I haven't read all of it, but like I could use something new and interesting.
Yes.
You know, when you like something like fantasy writing, for example, like you want something new and interesting. You want something that like is both your taste, but also
pushes you.
A lot of times it's the same world. It's the same hero's journey. It's the same bullshit. It's the same, oh, how many people will Martin kill? That's great. Like, here's some new ways of killing people. Like, okay, you know, you can only take that so far. And I think we're limiting ourselves. And I think like that genre and other ones too, they've, the constraints are like destroying it.
We're limiting ourselves as a society, and it's evidenced in how what gets published, and like who gets through the door as a physician, like who gets into government. It's everywhere. And like building awareness is the first step to like hopefully changing that a little bit.
I think so. But also there are a lot of people who are like, you're super interesting, right? I wonder about this. So you're super interesting and you share your stories. Like, what about the people who are like kind of boring? Like, some people are boring.
Stop. I honestly never think somebody's boring. I can there's
No, I
always
mean,
something.
you don't. Okay, you really don't.
No, I think everybody has a narrative and a story that is like their own, and that's so beautiful. Like even people I don't like, it takes me a lot to not like people, but even then I'm like, they got there somehow, and that's fascinating to me. Like I
Like
think
that you don't
everybody
like them. You're like, they must be really interesting to me. Someone I don't like. I'm not just like bored by them. Like I don't like them, which means there's something there.
yeah, there's something there. I don't think people are boring. I think we
I mean, a
it's
lot of
us
my life
as
is boring. I'm sorry. It's like, oh yeah, it's so
a
interesting. Like, you know what's fun? Like, let's decide what we should feed our kids, and then like maybe we can talk about potty training with like the ladies in the
That's
street.
so cool. I love that. Like,
Fun, but there's a lot of monotony that's like
oh, no.
not just like or for people who are living who are existing and barely getting by. Um, they don't have that luxury of being able to like talk about ideals, or maybe their personalities are more muted because of abuse or because of lack of support. Um, how do we? I don't know. Like I think there's so much noise out there now. So many people sharing so many things or trying to be loud
Yeah.
for attention, like someone did before he got kicked off of Twitter forever. Like
Right? Yeah.
um, like some people just aren't like into glitter, maybe.
I don't know how, but like, sure, I guess that could be a
It
thing.
could exist. Like,
Yeah,
let's say,
there's somebody
like,
out there who's not in a
I want
glitter.
to tell you a sad story from my marriage now that I haven't shared
Yeah.
online.
Okay, I'm here for it.
One day, my husband came home, and everyone married can relate to this, and it is the worst story. And he had found a sale suit jacket that was like green corduroy. And he's like, I love it. Was it his color? No. It made him look dead. Like it was literally the most hideous thing on the planet, but not hideous in a way that was even like interesting. Like it was just bad and it looked bad and it fit bad, like it was like, really? Like that is what you picked?
But he was probably so pleased with it.
He loved it and he wanted to wear all the time with everything. He's like, does it go with this? I'm like, honestly, that thing goes with nothing. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. Like,
But I love that. Like, I love that is such a memory for you.
no, and I'd always be like, honey, I bought you these boots. And he'd put them on and they'd be hideous. I'd be like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was dressing you up as Lady Gaga again. Like, backtrack. Like, I'll get something boring. Like, here's some Vans, you know?
But
Like,
I love that. That's like such a beautiful story.
or like people who wear like, you know, I have a
Certain
friend
outfits.
who wears clothes and like he doesn't always look good, right? It's like a button up, not even a flannel. And he's like, I wear it because I like it. So I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. It looks terrible,
But it makes them happy.
but I'm glad that you own it.
Yeah.
I don't even remember how we got here. I just
We got here
really
from
wanted,
glitter because like
yeah,
we just went off and it was
yeah.
great.
Some people don't like glitter, and that's wrong. But also, and they're wrong. And like,
Right there. That's the one time I on this like episode I will say that they're wrong. Like
they're wrong. They're just wrong.
yeah.
But I had a personal loss, so I had to share it.
I'm glad you did share it. Like I appreciate you
One
talking
time
about
my husband came home and it was just so bad I couldn't even pretend to
yeah,
like it. And he just loved that thing. Like it was like,
it was his thing.
yeah, yeah. Turns out his thing was really
Fugly.
really ugly.
And I think we need to you bring up such a good point though of like you still rode with it and like why let's just let people have their thing. Like
I mean, I silently and sometimes less silently
yeah.
like gave him that look. I was like,
Mm, mm.
okay, like I will be nice to you, but it's because I love you, not that.
But see, your love overrode anything else, which was good.
I was like, I love you, but a little less than that, but it's okay. Um, I don't even know. I don't know why I told you that story. It was totally off topic, but
Yeah,
I feel like now
I think it happened.
I'm gonna be like, Chase, what you should do is just tell people how much money you want to be paid for your book deal. You know, don't even bother. Be like,
I've just given up on that because like it's a
have to
lot.
know because you said it was still one of your dreams.
It's my dream, but dreams can be put on hold for a while you do some other things. And so it's on hold.
That's true, but I still think it's gonna happen.
We will see. If it does, I will let you know first. I will be like, it's coming.
That's
Yeah,
great.
we'd be like, it's
I don't
coming.
know what my dream is.
I was gonna ask, what is your dream? Like,
Well,
what is your
actually,
hope for the
years
future?
ago, I told my sister, I was like, I just want a job where I like sit online and like earn money, kind of by like being online,
I love those.
like on social media,
Yeah,
doing stuff,
yeah,
and like I kind of do that. Like I cover conferences, and
yeah.
like I also get to like meet with a lot of geeks, and like be like, how can we make this health data better? Like, let's talk about it. You know, ooh, what do we need to do in Medicaid to make sure people can get their stuff? Um,
So you're already doing your dream.
I kind of am. And
Yeah.
then I have a friend who's like a career coach, and he's asking someone like, "What do you want to do when you're older?" I'm like, "I want to be a pool mom." Which I don't know if you know this, but some people weren't really made to be pool moms because they can't do that whole sun thing. It's fine.
Wait, could you be like a shade pool mom where you
Yes, I found a way to be a shade pool mom. I would
okay.
like go to the gym, which has like a giant pool where we are, and they like have like a little shade place, and I just go sit in the shade. Like
I
not
love
too
that.
long because like I get too hot, but
You're
like
like, it's still warm.
like it's a little too hot for me. But yeah, I could be a shade pool mom.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I just don't know. I feel like I get to do the things I want to do.
It's
I'd like
good.
to be able to have more time, you know? Yeah, I'm always like, I don't know, just like sit online, do some stuff and get paid somehow.
Yeah.
And I do. It's really weird.
I love it. Like I think that's great. And it's nice you're living that dream.
That's a weird dream. I'm like,
No, it is. Hey,
I want
we're
to be
gonna.
a pool
It is
mom.
not weird. It
I'm like,
is
I
your
don't know.
dream.
I'm gonna be amazing, first of all, and take over the world, but like
I'm here for that too.
kind of a
Yeah.
different way. Like,
We all will take over the world in our own way, and
yeah,
then we will like all be equal, and it'll be great, and we'll be
I,
doing our own thing.
I do have more dreams about like I think healthcare is like a human right. And
Mhm.
I don't want to be like the head of a movement or anything, you know, but growing up I did always want to do something like heal mental health or make it safer
Agreed. Safer in
and
what way?
safer for people to be able to get help. I don't think it's always safe to be imperfect. And we've talked about this a little bit. Like it's really not. And I had like a friend who really had to fight. Like she fought to get mental health and to get recognition. And just what if we lived in a place where you didn't have to fight or you didn't ever see on Twitter like, oh, the poor people just want to take our money. Like, what if we just like, you know, wanted them to be healthy or wanted them to have homes, wanted them to be safe? Um, Especially I've had people in my life that were schizophrenic and really I wish we had a better place to understand that and to be able to shape our society to be safe for
Yeah.
that. Um, Especially with depression and when John died, like I didn't want to do anything. Like it was weird. Like I didn't want to come out of my closet. Like I was just like, don't care. And transitioning back into real life, people just kind of want it to be like, okay, you can have like your little time and then you have to be snapped back on.
That's how it
We
works.
don't have enough for the in between.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be an amazing dream to be able to have people not just be like, even in physician mental health, like not just be like, oh, like how can we protect physicians? Like, what if it was active, you know? What if you were actively trying to be better?
Yes.
Not enough for us to be like, I'm not the one who screwed it up. It's not enough. Like we need to actively be fighting for good, and not enough people do that. And you see that when you can see that even big and little, like on a little level, it's like, oh, what can I do for you? Instead of this is what I'm doing for you.
Yeah.
Big, you can see it as like, oh, physician burnout's bad. We care about it, but they
But
don't
what are
do
you
anything
doing?
about it.
What are you
Like,
doing about it?
like
Yeah.
show me how much you care in dollars. Like, show me how much you care about a minority student in dollars. Like, what about minority students? My husband got his master's at Drexel, and they did a lot of work in Philly. Like, show me your medical school program that helps people from Philly become physicians, like
Yeah.
that pays for everything in their life. And there are some programs that do that. There are actually small groups, but show me how, show me Bill Gates doing that, a lot of people kind of give, even like Jack on Twitter, like he does stuff, like he goes to like silent retreats or whatever, but he could like fund a lot. Like you do it to create that space, like you were talking about, like, to like sit and like be present, but are they actually making that possible for people who can't do it?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
Mhm.
They could, and we all could.
We all
So
could.
anyway,
It's so easy. Like
so
with small maneuvers, we could be in a better place already.
or even with mental health, like, and I say that as someone who like has had a hard time not knowing like when to stop giving, like, but when we tell people, oh, reach out for help, that's like,
It's useless advice sometimes.
it's the
It's like,
worst
here are the
disservice
places
ever,
you
and
go.
it's so rude.
Yeah.
Be like, oh yeah, like I'm sorry, but you people sharing the reach out for help people, pretty sure you didn't bring me dinner when my husband died.
Yeah.
Like, pretty sure you didn't like show up. But that's a different. I'm sorry, I just needed to put some bitterness into
Yeah.
this. Like, do you need to share
I'm here
that?
for it. Yeah. No, I think
We don't do that. Like, we don't
no.
show up for people, and we could. That being said, there are always people out there that are like giving too much,
Because I think they are trying to compensate for the people not giving enough, and it needs to be more balanced.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know how to do that. But that would be a cool dream to like have tons of money and just be able to like actively invest in
Mental health and like other things
mental
in
health.
humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be my dream, I guess.
Okay. I love it.
And really good shoes. But we
Here
just
for
put
it.
that out there at the end, Really love shoes too. Or if we could make something like a healthcare app that's like as interesting as Pokemon Go.
That's such a good idea, actually.
I get so mad about this. I'm like crazy. Like if Nintendo was like, hey, let's do something with mental health, that would be my dream.
That would be so cool. Could you imagine that kind of like game where like kids actually learn about like, oh, this is a character who like has depression. What do you do?
But
Or
it was like a cool widget, or it was like the coolest Pokemon. Like,
yeah.
what if like Eevee was a little depressed? They
How
could
do
make
you
a
help
new Eevee.
Evie? Yeah.
What?
How do you
Yeah,
help
like
Evie like get better? And how do you like know how to reach out and things like that? We could teach kids this kind of stuff early on.
yeah, we really could, and we should. My kids had an easier time, I think, during like COVID and staying home than a lot of other kids because they already had like tons of therapy. But that would be amazing, like doing something with Nintendo. I'm like a fangirl of their stuff. I'm like, what has really helped healthcare? Like Pokemon Go. You have some people who are diabetic. Oh, and they don't want to talk to people. Well, they have to, because it's a task. Like that you have to get points, and oh well,
And like having other kids understand like other kids have diabetes and this is how that looks and this is why they might be acting a little different. Like you could actually build a mental health game.
It would be so fun. So you and I, like, I'll send it to Nintendo. And I'm pretty sure it will work, just so you know, because things in my life do work.
I'm here for it.
You're in San Francisco too, so it's like,
oh yeah, like I'll throw a rock and like it'll hit a tech person.
Yeah.
They'll be like, yeah, I'm into it.
It'll hit some tech billionaire and they'll be like, I got a team.
Right? I've already built a team like just by clicking a button. We're ready to go.
Like, I'll text my guy. Yeah, so that would be my dream.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, besides like nice shoes and stuff.
Yeah.
And like,
I think we can want the like smaller things and we want the big things too.
yeah. And I'm like, Chase, I can help you publish a book. I don't know how, but it's a challenge, right? Yeah. So now I'm gonna. I don't know. I'm glad you came to meet with me. What's your dream for mental health for the future?
That it's talked about more openly and people care more about people struggling.
What do you mean care more? What does care more look like?
We're delving.
Sorry,
I think it goes
I'm
back
like,
to what you.
well,
No, I love it. Putting money into it, conversing about it at an early age so kids know, like when they're younger. Also teaching about it in schools, having it talked about and like funded by the government, everything.
That'd be wild.
Yeah, right.
That'd be amazing too, though. Like, I think if medicine took mental health as serious as it claims to, it would be amazing.
Game changer.
Yeah, like if we thought of it the same way we think of other diseases, like it wouldn't be the leading cause of death in Utah for young men. So I'm glad you told me your dreams and your favorite author, who I met in college. You know,
right?
That's not a very good name drop. That's like the worst name drop on the planet.
It's such a good name drop. I was
very
like, yeah, I was like, you saw me perk up. I was like, ooh.
I'm gonna stop recording if I can figure it out.